The man slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle every glass in the restaurant, leaned forward, and whispered something so cold it made the waiter physically step back. But the woman sitting across from him didn't flinch. She set down her fork, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "I've heard better lies from a child." Then she stood up and walked away. And that was the moment the most dangerous man in Boston realized he had a problem. Because nobody in 15 years had ever walked away from Adrian Castellano. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe to our channel right now and follow every twist until the very end. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Lydia Carter had never been good at accepting favors. That was the first thing people noticed about her, not her dark hair, not the careful way she chose her words, not the quiet intensity she carried into every room. No. The first thing people noticed was that Lydia Carter did not like owing anyone anything. So when her best friend Dana had called her 3 times in a single afternoon, Lydia already knew she was in trouble. "One date," Dana said. "One dinner. You don't even have to like him." Then, what's the point? The point is that you haven't left your apartment for anything except work and groceries in 4 months, Lydia. You need a human experience. I have human experiences. I talk to people. You talk to clients and cashiers. That doesn't count. Lydia switched the phone to her other ear and kept sorting through the stack of reports on her desk. She worked as a financial analyst at a mid-size investment firm called Halcott and Green. Not glamorous, not high profile, but honest work that paid her rent and kept her brother Marcus in his 2nd year of college without drowning in debt. "Dana, I'm not doing a blind date." His name is Daniel Brooks. "He's in finance, he's 38, and he has good teeth. That's literally all I know. Where did you find him?" A pause that lasted slightly too long. "Dana, a mutual connection set it up." "It's totally normal." "Which mutual connection? Does it matter?" "It always matters." Another pause. Then carefully, "He set it up himself, okay? He reached out through a friend of a friend, and he specifically asked about you. By name." That made Lydia stop moving. "He asked about me by name." "Yes. And you didn't find that strange." "I found it flattering on your behalf." Lydia set down the papers. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. In 4 years of living in Boston, working quietly, keeping her head down, she had never been someone that men sought out. She was not the type of woman who inspired grand gestures or mysterious interest. She was ordinary in every way that the world valued most, not wealthy, not connected, not particularly striking at first glance. Someone asking for her by name felt wrong in a way she couldn't fully articulate yet. But Dana was already talking about the restaurant, some place called Meridian, on the 14th floor of a downtown tower, and describing the dress she thought Lydia should wear, and Lydia found herself agreeing before she had fully decided to. That was how Dana operated. It was exhausting and effective. She arrived 12 minutes early, because she was always early. The restaurant was the kind of place Lydia had passed on the street 100 times and never entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows, low amber lighting, tables spaced far enough apart that conversations became private without trying. The kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, it felt expensive. The host greeted her by name before she gave it. That was the first thing she noticed. Small detail, easy to explain. Dana had probably made the reservation under her name. She was shown to a corner table near the window, and she sat down and ordered water and told herself she would give this exactly 90 minutes. 90 minutes was enough time to have a real conversation without committing to the entire evening. The man arrived 7 minutes later. Lydia recognized him from the description. Dana had texted tall, dark jacket, confident walk. He was good-looking in a controlled way, the kind of man who had decided early in life exactly how he wanted to appear and had never stopped performing that decision. He smiled when he saw her, and it was a practiced smile. She noted that immediately. "Lydia," he said, taking her hand. "I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you." He sat down and immediately signaled the waiter with a short, dismissive gesture. Not rude enough to be obviously offensive, just rude enough to tell her exactly how he ranked the people serving him. She filed that away. "This place suits you," he said, looking around the restaurant rather than at her. Clean. Understated. Not trying too hard. Lydia wasn't sure if that was a compliment directed at the restaurant or at her. She decided it didn't matter. "It's beautiful," she said simply. "I come here often. The owner and I have an understanding," he said it casually, the way men said things they wanted you to ask about. She didn't ask. The waiter returned, and Daniel ordered without looking at the menu, which might have suggested familiarity if he hadn't also ordered something wrong, asking for a dish that the waiter quietly explained was no longer on the menu. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a second. Then he recovered and ordered something else, with the same practiced confidence. He doesn't come here often, Lydia thought. He was performing the restaurant, the same way he was performing everything else. She ordered the salmon. By the 40-minute mark, Lydia had learned the following things about Daniel Brooks. He worked in finance, or he said he did, though he had been carefully vague about which firm and which role. He had connections to important people, connections that he mentioned repeatedly without ever specifying what those connections actually produced. He had an opinion about everything: her career, her neighborhood, her apparent lack of ambition, the restaurant's updated menu, the current economy, the right way to negotiate a contract, the wrong way most people lived their lives. And he laughed at his own observations before she had a chance to respond. Lydia ate her salmon and asked occasional questions. She was good at the performance of engagement. Years of client meetings had taught her how to appear present while her mind was working on a completely different problem. The problem she was currently working on was this: why had this man asked for her by name? Nothing about Daniel Brooks, or whoever this man actually was, suggested genuine interest in Lydia Carter specifically. He wasn't asking her questions. He wasn't curious about her. He was talking at her the way someone practiced a presentation. She was an audience, not a participant, so why her? "You're quiet," he said suddenly. "You've been doing most of the talking." He paused. Then he smiled again, and this time the smile was slightly different, sharper. More aware. Most women find that reassuring. A man who knows what he's doing. Most women, Lydia said evenly, aren't me. Something moved behind his eyes. She couldn't name it. Interest, maybe. Or calculation. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "What do you want to know? What do you care about?" It was a better question than she expected. She considered it honestly. "My brother," she said. "My work. Getting things right. Not wealth, not security. Security, yes, but not in the way you mean it." "How do I mean it?" "You mean having enough money that other people can't hurt you. I mean having enough integrity that you can still look at yourself in the morning." Silence. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Interesting," he said. And he said it the way people said interesting when they meant something else entirely. The evening cracked apart 40 minutes later. It happened over the wine. The waiter had brought a bottle, a good one. Lydia could tell even without expertise, and Daniel had tasted it, set it down, and said something to the waiter that Lydia almost missed because he'd lowered his voice slightly. But she'd heard it. "Tell your people in the back that this isn't what I asked for. And if you bring me the wrong thing again, I'll make sure your manager hears about it before the end of the night." The waiter, young, composed, trained, absorbed the threat without changing his expression. He took the bottle and left. Lydia set down her fork. "That was unnecessary." Daniel looked at her. "Excuse me?" "He brought the wrong wine. That happens. You didn't need to threaten his employment over it." "I wasn't threatening anything. I was setting expectations. You were humiliating him in front of other diners to make yourself feel significant." She said it calmly, without heat. "Those are different things." The table went very quiet. Daniel leaned back in his chair and looked at her the way people looked at something they had underestimated. "You know," he said slowly, "for someone in your position, you have a remarkable amount of opinions." "My position? A financial assistant at a firm nobody's heard of," he smiled. "I'm not saying it as an insult, I'm just noting the irony." Lydia felt the heat rise in her chest, not anger exactly. Something colder. Clarity. "You did research on me," she said. "Everyone researches. Before the date, of course." She looked at him. "And knowing where I work, what I earn, What I drive you still decided to sit down across from me and spend the evening talking about your connections and your opinions and your understanding with the owner of this restaurant. She paused. What are you actually looking for, Daniel? The name landed differently than she intended. He reacted to it, a small tightening around the eyes, almost invisible. Almost. Lydia filed that away too. I'm looking for an honest person, he said, and for the first time all evening, it sounded like the truth. Then you're doing a terrible job of finding one, she replied. Because honest people leave when they're treated like furniture. She picked up her purse. Thank you for dinner. She stood up. She was 12 feet from the exit when she walked directly into something solid. Not a wall. A man. He was standing in the path between the dining room and the entrance, as though he had placed himself there deliberately. Which she would understand later, he had. Still. The kind of stillness that didn't come from peace, it came from absolute control. He was wearing a dark suit, no tie, and he looked at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. Not surprise, not interest, something more careful than either of those. Don't walk away, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Not because he raised it, because of the way he occupied the space around him, as though the air itself paid attention to him. Lydia stopped, not because she was afraid, because something in her brain flagged the moment as significant in a way she didn't fully understand yet. I'm sorry, she said, because that was what people said when they nearly collided with strangers. I didn't see you. You were leaving. Yes, before the check. He can pay the check, he can afford it. She shifted to move around him. He didn't move aside. You're Lydia Carter, he said. She went still. The restaurant noise continued around them. The soft clink of glasses, murmured conversations, gentle music that cost more per note than most people's monthly rent. None of it touched the small specific quiet that had formed between her and this man. How do you know my name? She said. Because I know everything that happens in this building. He said it without arrogance. Just information. And because the man you just walked away from is not Daniel Brooks. The floor felt slightly less solid than it had a moment ago. What? His name is Carter Vale. He's a courier. He was paid to take you to dinner and report back on what you said, what you noticed, and whether you were a person worth worrying about. The information hit her in layers, each one landing before she could process the last. Someone had sent a fake man to have dinner with her, to observe her, to decide if she was worth worrying about. Who paid him? She asked. The man in front of her was quiet for exactly 1 second. I did, he said. His name was Adrian Castellano. She didn't know that yet. Not the name, not what it meant, not the weight that came attached to it. She found out later, minutes later, sitting in a private room at the back of the restaurant that she hadn't known existed, at a small table with 2 chairs and no visible exits except the door she'd come through. She found out because he told her. Not everything. Not right away. But enough. You sent someone to test me, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? He sat across from her with his hands flat on the table, a gesture she would later recognize as one of the few honest things he ever did involuntarily. People with power kept their hands where you could see them when they were being careful. It meant they wanted you to trust them. Because someone inside my organization gave your name to people I consider enemies, he said. Not your home address, not your workplace, just your name. As someone connected to me. I'm not connected to you. I've never heard of you. No. But 3 weeks ago, someone who works for me attended a dinner party at a home in Cambridge. Your name came up in a conversation. Someone suggested that you were someone I trusted. Lydia stared at him. I've never met you before tonight. I know. Then why would anyone say that? Because someone wanted to test whether I would react, he said. Whether the name Lydia Carter meant something to me. If I moved to protect you or to silence you, they would know I had a reason. And sending a fake date was your response to that. I wanted to know who you were before anyone else made a decision about you. Lydia sat back. Her mind was moving fast, pulling at threads. She was good at seeing structures, patterns in numbers, logic underneath behavior. That was what made her effective at her job. and what she was seeing now had a shape she didn't like. "You sent someone to evaluate me," she said slowly, "to see if I was a threat, or an asset, or just a random person who stumbled into a situation." Adrian looked at her steadily. "Yes. And now you're telling me this because the evaluation is over." And the answer was clear. What was the answer? "That you are exactly what you appear to be," he said. "Which, in my world, is extraordinarily rare." Lydia looked at the man sitting across from her, the expensive suit, the deliberate calm, the hands still flat on the table, and felt something shift in her chest. Not fear. She would understand why later. But right now, in this moment, what she felt was something closer to anger. "You used me," she said. "Without my consent, without any warning, you dropped me into a situation designed to test me for your benefit. And now you're sitting here telling me the results, as though I should feel grateful for the information." Adrian didn't flinch. "Yes," he said. "That's not an apology." "No, it isn't." "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a moment. And then, in the same level tone he'd used for everything else, "It's an explanation. I don't apologize for protecting what matters to me. But I do explain, when explanation is warranted." "What matters to you?" Lydia repeated. "I'm not something that matters to you. I'm a stranger." "You were a stranger," Adrian said, 3 weeks ago. Before someone put your name in front of people who hurt strangers for sport." The word sport landed with unexpected weight. Lydia breathed. "What do you want from me?" she asked. And Adrian Castellano, who had not hesitated once in the entire conversation, took exactly 2 seconds before answering. "Nothing," he said. "Not yet." The private room had a window. She hadn't noticed it at first because the curtain was drawn, but when she looked at it now, she could see the glow of the city through the fabric, orange and white and distant, the way Boston looked on a clear night from a height. She stood up. "I'm leaving," she said. "All right. You're not going to stop me." "No." She looked at him. "You stopped me before. I stopped you before so I could talk to you," he said. "Now I've talked to you, and you're just going to let me walk out into a situation you yourself just described as dangerous." Something moved in his expression, barely visible, but she caught it. He hadn't expected that response. She had surprised him by using his own information as leverage, instead of reacting to it with fear. "You have 2 options," he said, and now his voice was slightly different. Still controlled, but more direct. "You leave, you go home, and you live your life exactly as it was, 24 hours ago. The people who put your name in play may look at you again. They may decide you're relevant, or they may move on. Or you let me put someone on your building tonight while I deal with the person who started this." Lydia stared at him. "You're offering me protection. I'm offering you a practical solution to a problem I created. By sending someone to spy on me, by allowing your name to circulate in a space where it shouldn't have been." "That's still not an apology." "No," he agreed, "it isn't." She put her hand on the back of the chair and thought for exactly 8 seconds. She counted, without meaning to, because that was what her mind did when it was working through something it didn't like. "How long?" she said. "1 night. Possibly 2, depending on what I find. And then it's done. You're out of my life. I never see you again. And whoever said my name decides I'm not worth their time." Adrian looked at her with an expression she still couldn't fully decode. "Possibly," he said. "That's not reassuring. It's honest." "You said you valued honesty." She had said that to the man she now knew was not Daniel Brooks, at a table less than 30 feet from where she was standing, an hour ago, when she still believed the evening was simply a bad date. She had said it, and apparently this man had been listening. "Fine," she said, "1 night. Good. I want a name. A real one. Not a cover." He looked at her. "Adrian," he said. "That's a first name. It's what you're getting tonight." She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. "1 night, Adrian. Then we're done." She didn't hear him respond. But when she reached the door and opened it and stepped back into the soft noise of the restaurant, she had the distinct and uncomfortable feeling that the man behind her had already decided they were not done at all. She found out his full name from a news article at 11:47 that night. She hadn't gone looking for it. She had gone home, changed out of her dinner dress, made tea, and sat at her kitchen table with the intention of grading the situation the same way she graded everything calmly, factually, without emotional inflation. But she had typed the restaurant name into her phone Meridian, 14th floor, looking for ownership information because knowing who owned a restaurant told you something about a situation. And the first result that came up was a business profile. And the name attached to it was Adrian Castellano. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed his name directly into the search bar. The results were careful. That was the first thing she noticed. Not sparse, there were plenty of articles, profiles, references, but careful, as though every piece of information about Adrian Castellano had been allowed to exist precisely because it revealed nothing that mattered. The articles described him as a private equity investor, a philanthropist, a reclusive billionaire who had grown a significant family business empire across the Northeast. They mentioned charitable foundations. They mentioned real estate holdings. They mentioned a reputation for privacy so complete that no journalist had successfully profiled him in over a decade. What the articles didn't say directly, they implied through what they avoided. Family business, Northeast corridor operations, a reputation that preceded him in rooms he hadn't entered yet. Lydia set down her phone and looked at the wall above her kitchen table for a long time. Then she looked at the window. There was a car parked on the street below that had not been there when she arrived home. Dark sedan, engine off, no visible occupant, but the way it was positioned, angle, distance from the entrance, was not the position of a car that had parked randomly. Someone was watching her building, not threatening, not encroaching, just present, just exactly what he had said he would do. She finished her tea. She did not sleep for a long time. But when she finally did, it was the first night in 4 months that she felt, without fully understanding why, that someone was paying attention to whether she was safe. That feeling scared her more than the dark sedan, because she recognized it. It felt like being seen, and Lydia Carter had not been seen, really seen, not assessed, not evaluated, not measured for usefulness in longer than she could honestly remember. She didn't know yet what that meant. She was afraid she was starting to. She told herself she would not think about him in the morning. That lasted until approximately 6:43, when her phone rang and the number on the screen was one she did not recognize. And she picked it up because she always picked up numbers she didn't recognize, a habit from years of managing clients who called from rotating lines, and the voice on the other end was his. "You searched my name last night," Adrian said. Lydia sat up in bed. "Good morning to you too. You found the restaurant ownership. Then you ran a full search. You were awake until past 1. The fact that he knew that should have frightened her. The fact that it didn't frighten her more. If you're watching my building, you're watching my lights," she said. That's not impressive intelligence work. That's basic observation. Most people would have called the police. Most people hadn't already agreed to 1 night of protection from a man whose last name apparently makes other men nervous. A pause. "You read the articles. I read the articles that exist," she said, which were very carefully written to say a great deal about nothing. "What did you conclude?" She stood up and walked to the kitchen, phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder, filling the kettle with the kind of practiced motion that meant she was thinking hard about something else. "I concluded," she said, "that you are either a very legitimate businessman with an unfortunate reputation, or a very dangerous man with an excellent publicity operation. And I concluded that the difference matters a great deal to whether I should answer your calls. And yet you answered. I'm still deciding if that was a mistake." She heard something on his end that might have been a breath of amusement. Not a laugh. Adrian Castellano did not seem like a man who laughed easily. "The man who was watching your building last night has been replaced," he said. "The situation from last night is being handled." "Handled," she repeated. "That's a word that covers a lot of territory. It means the person who circulated your name will not do so again. Because you talked to them." "Yes." She turned on the burner under the kettle. "Adrian, when you say talked, I mean talked," he said, and something in his voice made the word land with a specific weight that told her exactly what kind of talking he meant, and exactly how much she did not want the details. Your name is no longer a point of interest to anyone outside this situation. You're safe. So we're done, she said. Yes. She waited for the relief. It didn't come in the shape she expected. Instead, there was a specific kind of quiet on the line, the kind that meant both people were waiting for the other to say the thing they were both thinking. She was not going to say it first. One question, she said instead. Yes. The person who told people my name was connected to you. Who was it? Who started this? The pause that followed was exactly 1 beat too long. That's still being determined, he said. Lydia noted the pause. She filed it. All right, she said. Then I'll go to work. And we're done. Yes, he said again. She hung up. She drank her tea and got dressed and went to work and spent the entire day doing exactly what she always did: processing reports, reviewing projections, attending a meeting about Q3 allocations that she had prepared for and the other two attendees clearly hadn't. She did not think about Adrian Castellano. She thought about him constantly. The second call came 4 days later. She was walking home from the tea stop, cutting through the small park near her building, the way she always did because it added 3 minutes to the walk but made her feel less like a person being processed by a city. And her phone rang with the same unrecognized number. She answered before she'd consciously decided to. Someone followed you from the station, Adrian said without greeting. Gray jacket. He's been on your route since Copley. Lydia did not turn around. She had learned, in 31 years of life, that the worst thing you could do when you thought you were being watched was to look. You're having me followed, she said. I told you the situation was being handled. I didn't say it was finished. You told me I was safe. You are safe, because I'm having you followed. She kept walking. Same pace, same route. What do I do, she asked, and she hated that she was asking. She hated that she didn't already know. Nothing, he said. Keep walking, go home, lock your door. He's not there to hurt you. He's there to see if you're still worth monitoring. Worth monitoring, she repeated. Because someone still thinks I have a connection to you. Yes, but I don't. No, he said. You don't. She turned the corner onto her street. Her building was visible from here: the green door, the worn stone steps, the second-floor window that always stuck and that her landlord had promised to fix 6 months ago. The man behind me, she said quietly. Does he know someone is watching him? Not yet. What happens when he goes back and reports that I'm just a woman who went to work and came home? Ideally, Adrian said, they decide you were never relevant and move on. And less ideally, another pause, less ideally, they decide that someone watching you means you are relevant. She stopped walking, 2 houses from her building. She stood on the sidewalk and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. So your protection is both the solution and the problem, she said. Welcome to my world, he said quietly. I don't want to be in your world. I know. Stop saying I know like it's an answer. It is the answer, he said. I know you don't want this. I know you didn't choose it. I know that doesn't change where we are. She opened her eyes. She walked to her door, put the key in the lock, went inside. Come to the restaurant tomorrow night, he said. 7 o'clock. I want to show you something. No. Lydia, if I come to the restaurant, whoever is following me connects me to you directly. That's worse than where we are now. A silence. And in that silence, she had the distinct impression that she had just said something he hadn't considered, or hadn't expected her to consider. Not the restaurant, he said slowly. There's an office building on State Street, 9th floor. 6 o'clock. And if someone is following me there, I'll have the tail removed before you arrive. Removed, she said. Like last time when things got handled. No one is getting hurt, Lydia. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. She sat down on the edge of her couch, with her coat still on and her bag still on her shoulder, because she hadn't decided yet if she was staying. Why do you want to show me something? She asked. Because you deserve to understand the situation you're in, he said. And because I think, once you understand it, you will help me solve it faster than I can solve it alone. That caught her off guard. You need my help. I need your perspective, he said. That's different. Is it? Yes. I have people who help me. I don't have anyone who thinks the way you think. She sat with that for a moment. 6 o'clock, she said, finally. State Street. But Adrian? Yes. If I walk into that building and feel, for 1 second, like I don't have the option to leave, I will burn your entire careful reputation to the ground with every journalist who has ever tried to write about you. I have their contact information. I know how to make information move. The silence that followed was longer than any previous one. Then, you researched the journalist who tried to profile me. I research everything. You should have expected that. Another pause. And then, in a voice that was harder to read than any he'd used before, 6 o'clock, Lydia. I'll see you then. The building on State Street was the kind that housed 20 different companies and asked no questions about any of them. She rode the elevator to the 9th floor and found a door with no name on it, knocked twice, and was let in by a man who introduced himself as Leo, and was clearly not a man whose actual job involved introductions. Adrian was standing at the far end of the room at a table covered in documents. Not scattered, organized, layered in a specific arrangement that Lydia recognized as intentional before she understood why. He looked up when she entered. "You came," he said. "You sound surprised." "I'm not surprised." He paused, which was notable. Relieved. She came to the table and looked at what was spread across it. Financial records, transfer documents, corporate filings from at least 4 different states. 2 of them she recognized immediately as shell structures, the kind of layered entities that showed up in financial fraud cases. "This is what someone is using my name to reach," Adrian said. "This is what they want access to." Lydia leaned over the documents. Her eyes moved quickly. She couldn't help it. Her brain pulled at the numbers the same way it always did, looking for the seam, the place where the structure didn't hold. "These aren't your primary accounts," she said. "No. They're subsidiaries. But the structure." She picked up one of the documents. "This is a holding pattern. Someone set this up to receive, not to operate. They're waiting for a transfer authorization." Adrian looked at her. "3 of my financial people missed that," he said. "Your financial people were looking for a threat," she said. "I'm looking at the math. Different problem." She set the document down. "Someone inside your organization set up a receiving structure, and they need a second authorization to activate it. That's why they're looking for who you trust. They need someone with the second key." "The second key doesn't exist yet," Adrian said. "I haven't designated a secondary authorization for this account because I hadn't decided who I trusted enough." "So they're not stealing from you now," she said. "They're positioning to steal from you later. When you designate someone." "Yes, which means they already know who the candidates are." The room was very quiet. "I'm one of the candidates," Adrian said. "No." She understood it a second before he finished speaking. "I'm one of the candidates," she said instead. Not a question. Adrian's jaw was tight. "Someone put your name in play as a person I might trust," he said. "I ever designated a secondary authorization and chose you someone with clean financial credentials and no visible connection to my operations, the transfer would clear without triggering a single flag." Lydia set both hands flat on the table. "They were going to use me to rob you," she said. "And I would never have known." "No, they would have set up a paper trail. Credentials. Authorizations with my name on them." "Yes. And when it was done, when the money moved, you would have taken the fall," he said. "Fully documented. Completely framed. Gone before you understood what happened." She stood upright. The shape of it was so clean it was almost elegant, the way certain frauds were, the ones that worked because they were designed not from the center, but from the edges, using people who didn't know they were pieces. She had spent 3 years at Halcott and Green, reviewing financial discrepancies. She had found 2 major fraud attempts and 1 embezzlement pattern that the partners hadn't seen. She had thought she understood how these structures worked. She had never been inside one before. "Who built this?" she asked. "Someone with significant technical knowledge of my organization," Adrian said. "Someone who has been in my proximity for years. Someone who knows enough to know I would eventually designate a secondary authorization for this account, and exactly which types of people I would choose. A financial professional. Someone clean. Someone outside your immediate circle." "Yes. And they found me how?" The dinner party in Cambridge, he said. 3 weeks before, I sent Carter Vale to meet you. You attended. Your employer was there, a partner at Halcott and Green named Griffin. You were there as a +1. She remembered it. An uncomfortable evening at someone's large house. Polished conversation she hadn't enjoyed. She had left early. Someone at that dinner connected me to you, she said. I've never met you. Someone connected you to Griffin, Adrian said, who has done legitimate financial consulting for one of my subsidiary companies for 11 months. It's a single-thread connection, barely visible, but for someone who was already looking. It was enough, she said. Yes. She walked away from the table and stood at the window with her back to him, looking at the lights of the city without seeing them, her mind moving through the structure of what he'd just told her. She was never a person in this plan. She was an instrument. A clean, credible, unknowing instrument, designed to appear trustworthy, because she actually was. And if she had never gone to that dinner, if Dana had never pushed her toward a blind date, if she had walked out of that restaurant 30 seconds in faster and never collided with the man standing in her path, she would have woken up one morning, sometime in the future, to police at her door and a financial record she couldn't explain, and a crime she had not committed with her name written all over it. She turned back around. I want to see the full structure, she said. Every document you have. I want to trace it from the beginning. Adrian looked at her with an expression she still hadn't fully categorized. Lydia, this isn't your problem to solve. It is my name on those documents, she said. It is my career and my freedom and my brother's financial stability that goes up in smoke if this thing executes. So do not tell me it isn't my problem. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled a chair out from the table. Sit down, he said. I'll get you everything. They worked for 3 hours. Lydia did not think about the fact that she was sitting in an unmarked office with a man whose name made journalists nervous, tracing a financial fraud scheme through 4 states and 7 shell corporations. She thought about the documents. She thought about the numbers. She thought about the seam. Adrian did not speak much while she worked. He answered her questions precisely and without deflection, which was more than she could say for most of the financial professionals she had worked alongside. At 9:15 she found it. Here, she said, pushing a document toward him. This entity. 4th layer, Delaware filing. This one is different from the others. He leaned forward. The naming convention is wrong, she said. Every other entity in this structure uses a randomized alphanumeric sequence. This one uses initials. M Holdings. Adrian went very still. MV, she said. Is that meaningful to you? He did not answer immediately. The silence expanded in a specific way, the kind that had content in it, the kind that came from a man rapidly rearranging a picture he thought he already knew. It could be coincidence, he said. You don't believe it's coincidence? No, he said. I don't. Who has those initials? He was looking at the document with an expression she had seen from him before. Not calculation. Not the careful control of a man who managed threat for a living. Something underneath that. Something that looked remarkably, painfully human. A man named Marcus Vale, he said quietly, who has worked with me for 11 years. Who I trusted more than almost anyone. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Lydia watched the ripples move across Adrian's face, the compression around his eyes, the way his jaw set, the slight tension in the hands that were still flat on the table. He's your person, she said. Not unkindly, the one you thought it wasn't. He has been my closest associate, since before this organization was what it is, Adrian said. He knows everything. Then he knows enough to build something this careful. Yes, and he knows enough to know you'd never suspect him. He thought so, Adrian said. She noted the tense. You're going to confront him, she said. Yes. Tonight? He looked at her, and the look was not the look of a man about to have a business confrontation. It was the look of a man about to lose something he had believed in for a decade, and who knew it, and who was holding himself together by the particular discipline that powerful men used when they could not afford to let anyone see them come apart. Not tonight, he said. If I move too fast, he destroys the documentation, and we have nothing provable. This has to be done carefully. How carefully? carefully enough that when it's done, it's finished. Not challenged, not denied, finished. Lydia sat with that. She understood what finished meant, in the vocabulary of a man whose world operated outside the framework of civil courts and police reports. She was not sure how she felt about that, but she was also sitting in front of documentation that had her name written into a fraud structure designed to destroy her life. And the man who had built that structure was someone else's closest friend. She picked up her bag. "When you said you needed my perspective," she said. "Did you know I would find that?" Adrian looked at her carefully. "No," he said. "I knew you would find something I'd missed. I didn't know what. But you brought me here because you trusted me to look at your finances. I brought you here," he said slowly, "because you were the only person in my current situation who I was certain had no reason to lie to me." She thought about that. "That's not trust," she said. "That's calculation. In my world," he said, "they're the same thing for a very long time before they become different." She stood up. "I want copies of those documents," she said. "My own copies, not held by you. In my possession." He could have refused. She expected him to refuse. "Leo will make them," he said, "before you leave." She looked at him. "That's the most surprising thing you've done since I met you," she said. "You said you valued people who gave you something real," he replied. "Those documents are as real as I have." She said nothing to that. She took the copies, put them in her bag, and walked to the door. "Adrian," she said with her hand on the frame. "Yes." "When you deal with Marcus Vale," she stopped. "Started again. He was your friend, a real one for a long time. Whatever he became, whatever he built, that part was real. Don't let whatever comes next make you forget that it was real. It matters that it was real. The quiet that followed was different from all the others." "Why does it matter?" he asked. And the question was genuine. She could hear it. "Because if you forget it was real," she said, "you'll spend the next 10 years believing that nothing is. And that would be the worst thing he ever did to you." She left before he could answer. But she heard him, very quietly, in the last fraction of a second before the door closed behind her, say something in a voice that was not the voice of a man who owned restaurants or commanded rooms or held the nervous attention of an entire city. It was just a voice, tired and human and honest. He said, "All right." Just that, "all right." And Lydia Carter walked to the elevator and pressed the button, and stared at the closed doors and told herself that what she was feeling was nothing more than the particular exhaustion of a person who had just spent 3 hours untangling someone else's crisis. She told herself that. She did not entirely believe it. She did not hear from him for 6 days. 6 days of ordinary life, which should have felt like relief and instead felt like the specific tension of waiting for a sound you knew was coming but couldn't predict. She went to work. She reviewed reports. She attended 2 client meetings and 1 internal review session that ran 40 minutes over schedule because her colleague Raymond could not summarize anything in under 4 paragraphs. She did not look at the copies of the documents she'd taken from the State Street office. They were in a folder inside a locked drawer in her apartment desk, and she did not need to look at them because she had already memorized everything significant in the first 2 hours after getting home that night. That was the other thing she had not told Adrian. She had a near photographic memory for financial structures. Numbers arranged in patterns stayed in her mind the way certain songs stayed completely, persistently, available at any moment without effort. She knew the MV Holdings structure the way she knew her own account numbers. On the 4th day, she ran the Delaware filing number quietly through a public corporate registry and found 3 additional subsidiaries she hadn't seen in the documents Adrian had shown her. Not hidden exactly, just adjacent, connected by a single officer name that appeared on all 3. The officer name was not Marcus Vale. It was a woman named Eleanor Marsh. Lydia stared at that name for a long time. Then she closed the registry window, locked her computer, and spent the rest of the day pretending she hadn't found it. On the 6th day, her phone rang at 7 in the morning. "We have a problem," Adrian said. "Good morning. Marcus knows I've been looking." She sat up. "How?" "Someone inside my legal team told him. I haven't identified who yet." His voice was controlled, but underneath the control, there was a tightness she had learned to recognize as the sound of a man managing something that was costing him more than he would admit. He reached out last night. He wants a meeting. He wants to assess how much you know, she said immediately. Yes. Are you going to meet him? I already did. This morning, an hour ago, Lydia pushed back the blanket and stood up, because sitting felt wrong for this conversation. And he lied to my face, Adrian said. Completely. Smoothly. 11 years of friendship, and he sat across from me and lied without a single hesitation. Another pause. I expected it. I was prepared for it. He stopped. It still felt like losing him, she said. The silence confirmed it. He denied everything, she asked. Everything. And he was convincing. If I hadn't seen the documents myself, if you hadn't found the MV holding signature a breath, he would have convinced me. I think he was counting on the fact that I'd want to be convinced. Because you trust him. Because I trusted him. Past tense, a pause. He also said something at the end of the meeting. As he was leaving. What? He asked about you, by name. Adrian's voice had gone completely flat. He said he'd heard I'd been spending time with a woman from outside my organization. He said he hoped I was being careful. He said, and these were his exact words, that it would be a shame if someone I'd grown close to got caught in the middle of a complicated situation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. That's a threat, she said. Yes. He's telling you he knows about me. He's telling you he can use me.
Yes.
And you're calling me at 7 in the morning. Because last night, someone broke into your neighbor's apartment, Adrian said. Unit 12, directly next to yours. Your neighbor was not home. Nothing was taken. But the point of entry, the window faces the wall adjacent to your bedroom. Lydia stood very still. They were measuring, she said. Or sending a message. To you or to me, both, he said. Get dressed. I'm sending someone. Adrian, Lydia. Please. It was the first time he had used that word with her. Please. Unqualified. Unstrategic. Just the word itself. Unguarded. It landed differently than anything else he'd said in 2 weeks. She got dressed. Leo arrived in 14 minutes in a car that was not the dark sedan from before. He didn't speak on the way to wherever they were going, which Lydia had learned was his standard operating mode. Leo communicated in small physical gestures, a slight tilt of the head, a brief eye contact in the rear view, a particular stillness that meant everything is clear versus the slight forward lean that meant stay alert. She had cataloged all of these in the time she'd spent in his proximity and found the system more honest than most verbal communication she encountered daily. They arrived at a building she hadn't been to before, a private residence, not an office. On a quiet street in a neighborhood where the houses were old and the trees were older and the whole block communicated money so established it no longer needed to announce itself. Adrian met her at the door. He looked like a man who had not slept, which she suspected was true, and like a man who had decided that the lack of sleep was irrelevant to the current operation, which she also suspected was true. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine. I wasn't in the apartment. That's not what I asked. She looked at him. I'm not frightened, she said. I'm angry. Those are different. Something in his expression shifted. I know, he said. Stop saying that. And start telling me what your actual plan is, she said. Because Marcus Vale knows you're looking at him, he's threatened me directly, and whatever careful timeline you had for dealing with this has just been completely compressed. Yes, he said. Come inside. There were 3 other people in the house, a man named Garrett, who handled what Adrian called logistics, and Lydia privately categorized as consequences. A woman named Sasha, who had the title of legal counsel and the eyes of someone who had seen significantly more than legal counsel typically saw. And a younger man introduced simply as Dev, who was doing something on a laptop that involved several browser windows Lydia didn't ask about. Adrian laid out the situation with economical precision. Someone in his legal team had tipped off Marcus. Marcus had moved faster than anticipated. The receiving structure, the MV Holdings network, designed to siphon funds using Lydia's credentials, had been partially activated, not fully, but enough to show intent. Partially activated means what exactly? Lydia asked. It means he's tested the channel, Dev said from behind his laptop. Pushed a small amount through to confirm the pathway works. Less than 10,000. Enough to prove the route is clean. And my name is on the test transfer, she said. Dev looked at Adrian. Answer her, Adrian said. Yes, Dev said. Your name appears as secondary authorization on the test transfer. He must have found a way to generate a credential signature. Lydia turned to face the middle of the room. The anger she had described to Adrian was very clear and very cold inside her chest. He forged my authorization, she said, without ever meeting me. Without any access to my actual credentials. He built a fake paper identity robust enough to clear an internal transfer check. He's been building it for months, Sasha said. Probably since the Cambridge dinner. He had time. How much is in the receiving account? Current exposure, Dev said, checking his screen. If the full transfer executes, approximately 11 million. Silence. And when it moves, Lydia said, it moves with my name on it. Yes, Adrian said. She turned to him. You need to let me help stop this, she said. Lydia, not as a favor. Not as a protected civilian you're managing. As the person who actually understands the financial structure better than anyone in this room, including you. She looked around. I found the MV Holdings signature before you did. I found 3 additional subsidiaries this week that weren't in the documents you showed me. And I know something else that I haven't told you yet. The room went very still. Adrian looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read surprise. Yes, but something underneath it, a particular quality of attention that was not quite professional and not quite personal, and was, she suspected, both. What did you find, he said. An officer name on 3 of the subsidiary filings, she said. Not Marcus Vale. A woman named Eleanor Marsh. She's listed as corporate officer on all 3. Sasha pulled out her phone immediately. Dev started typing. Adrian did not move Eleanor Marsh, he said. You know her, Lydia said. It wasn't a question. His reaction was too specific for anything else. Eleanor Marsh, he said again, very slowly, is Marcus Vale's sister. She changed her last name 14 years ago, after her first marriage. The room absorbed that. So this isn't just Marcus, Garrett said from his corner. It's a family operation. He brought in his sister, Sasha said. Someone completely outside our visibility. No known connection to our organization. Clean corporate profile, which means the structure is more protected than we thought, Dev said. Even if we move against Marcus, Eleanor can complete the transfer independently if she has the activation credentials. Lydia watched Adrian process this in real time. She had seen him manage information before, the careful, controlled way he sorted through complications without letting them show on his face. But this was different. This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks that someone he had built his world around had turned out to be other than he believed. First the betrayal, then the scope of it, now the depth. How long has she been involved, he asked Dev. Based on the filing dates. Dev scrolled. At least 18 months. 18 months. Lydia did the math without thinking about it. 18 months ago, Adrian had presumably been operating on the assumption that Marcus Vale was loyal, that his organization was structurally sound, that the people closest to him were the people they presented themselves to be. And for all 18 of those months, 2 people he never suspected had been quietly, methodically building a machine designed to take him apart. Adrian, she said, quietly. He turned to look at her. If Eleanor has the activation credential independently, she said, then Marcus, meeting with you this morning, may not have been about assessing your knowledge. He understood before she finished. It was a delay, he said. He needed you focused on him. Occupied. Long enough for... Adrian was already moving, turning to Dev. Check the account. Right now. Check whether any additional transfers have initiated in the last 3 hours. Dev's fingers moved fast. The room held its breath in the specific way rooms did when the answer was coming, and everyone already knew it wasn't going to be good. 2 transfers, Dev said. Initiated 40 minutes ago. Combined value, he stopped. Dev, Adrian said. 7.4 million. Both flagged pending secondary authorization. They're waiting for the secondary sign-off to clear. Lydia understood the structure cold and completely in 1 second. They're waiting for my authorization, she said. The fake one. And if it clears the moment Eleanor activates the credential signature she built under your name, Adrian said. How long until it activates automatically if no one intervenes? Dev checked. Based on the transfer protocol, 45 minutes. If no authorization block is placed by then, the system treats it as a confirmed secondary approval and the transfers execute. 45 minutes. Lydia looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at Lydia. And in that look there was no performance, no management, no careful calculation of what to reveal and what to hold back. There was just two people standing in the same emergency with 45 minutes to stop it. I can block it, she said. Not through your systems, through the financial institution. If I call in a fraud report on a transfer bearing my credential signature, they're legally required to freeze the transaction for investigation before it clears. It's a regulation. I know the exact process. They'll want documentation, Sasha said. Proof of identity fraud. I have the documents, Lydia said. I made copies. They're in my apartment. We can get them, Leo said from the doorway. And I need to make the call personally, Lydia said. From a verifiable number, they won't accept a third-party report for a credential fraud claim of this size. It has to be me. Adrian was looking at her with an expression she would think about later. Not gratitude exactly, not relief. Something more fundamental than either of those, the look of a man who had spent so long being the only person who could solve his own problems that the experience of someone standing next to him and solving one had temporarily made him forget what language to speak. Make the call, he said. Sasha had a phone in her hand, and the number already pulled up before Lydia reached her. It took 22 minutes. The financial institution's fraud department wanted documentation, identity verification, a case number from the relevant regulatory body, and 3 separate callbacks to confirm the report was legitimate and not itself a manipulation attempt. Lydia went through all of it with the precision of someone who had spent 6 years navigating exactly this kind of institutional process. She was calm, not the performed calm she sometimes used in client meetings. Actually calm, because the numbers were a language she spoke better than anything else, and in the middle of this particular crisis, she was the most fluent person in the room. The final confirmation came through with 11 minutes to spare. Both transfers were frozen pending fraud investigation. Eleanor Marsh's credential activation, when it fired at the 43-minute mark, hit a brick wall. Dev watched it happen on his screen and said, very quietly, it bounced. The room breathed. Adrian sat down for the first time since Lydia had arrived. He sat in a chair near the window and put one hand over his mouth and stared at nothing for a few seconds, which she suspected was the Adrian Castellano equivalent of a significant emotional response. You stopped it, Garrett said, looking at Lydia with an expression she didn't often receive the specific respect of a person who was paid to handle problems, looking at someone who had just handled one faster than he could have. The documentation stopped it, she said. I just made the call. You found the documentation, Sasha said. You found Eleanor Marsh. You built the fraud case, and she glanced at her watch. Under 3 hours. The structure was already there, Lydia said. I just read it. Adrian looked up from his chair. Don't do that, he said. She looked at him. Don't minimize what you just did, he said. I have very good people in this room. None of them found Eleanor Marsh. None of them caught the activation timing. You walked in here 2 hours ago, and you changed the outcome. He looked at her steadily. Take the credit. It was such a direct statement, delivered with such complete lack of performance, that Lydia didn't have an immediate response. She was not accustomed to being told simply, without qualifier, that she had done something that mattered. Okay, she said. Okay, I take the credit. She sat down across from him. Now what happens to Marcus? Adrian's expression changed. The brief openness closed back down, not coldly, not entirely, but the way a window closed when the weather turned. He'll know the transfers failed, he said. He'll know someone blocked it. He'll assume it was me. Will he know it was me specifically? Eventually, he's methodical, he'll trace it. Which means he still sees me as leverage. Yes, until this is finished. How does it finish, Adrian? She asked. The question was direct, and she meant it to be. I understand your world operates differently from the one I live in. I've accepted that, at least provisionally. But I'm asking you specifically, what does finished look like? Because my name is on a federal fraud investigation now. The institution that froze those transfers is going to be asking questions. Regulatory inquiries follow fraud reports. That doesn't disappear when you handle Marcus Vale. Adrian leaned forward. I know, he said. And this time, for the first time, the phrase didn't feel like a deflection. It felt like the beginning of something. I have a legal team, he said. A legitimate one, separate from Sasha's operational work. They handle exactly these kinds of institutional crossovers. Your name goes into the fraud report as the victim of credential theft, which is true and is supported by documentation that I will make sure is complete and unassailable. When the investigation concludes, your name comes out clean. Cleaner than it went in, because there's a documented record of you reporting it. She thought about that. And Marcus? Marcus Vale will be provided, through appropriate channels, to the relevant authorities with full documentation of the financial fraud he constructed, Sasha said, in a voice that indicated she had prepared this answer. The evidence will be legitimate. The case will be straightforward. The outcome will not require anything outside standard legal process. Lydia looked at Sasha, then at Adrian. Is that true? For Marcus, Adrian said. Yes. He built a financial fraud structure. The evidence is clean. The legal case is real. I have no interest in anything outside that for him. And Eleanor? The same. Then why, Lydia said carefully, does this feel like there's a third thing you're not saying? Adrian held her gaze. Garrett shifted slightly in his corner. Dev found something very interesting to look at on his laptop. Because there is a third thing, Adrian said. The person inside my legal team who told Marcus I was looking, who warned him, who gave him the window to initiate the transfers, is not someone I can hand to the authorities. Because the evidence of what they did is internal. And because finding them requires a kind of search that doesn't happen in conference rooms. You're going to look for them yourself, she said. Yes, and when you find them, he didn't answer. She had known, intellectually, from the first night in that back room at Meridian, that Adrian Castellano's world had dimensions she would never fully see and would not want to. She had chosen to engage with the parts she could engage with, honestly. She had chosen to be useful in the ways she actually was useful. She had chosen, and it had been a choice, at every step to keep showing up. But this was the edge of what she could choose to know. She felt it clearly. Okay, she said. Okay, I heard you. I understand what you're saying and what you're not saying. And I'm choosing not to ask any further. She met his eyes. Not because I'm naive, because I believe you when you say you're not going to hurt people who don't deserve it. And I'm choosing to extend that belief. Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then that's more trust than I've earned. No, she said. It's exactly the amount you've earned. It just might feel like more, because you're not used to anyone giving you any. Something moved across his face, fast, unguarded, gone in less than a second. But she saw it. She was beginning to learn his face the way she learned financial documents, carefully, completely, alert to the moments when the structure revealed more than it intended. What she saw in that moment was not the man who owned buildings and managed silence and inspired fear in rooms he hadn't entered yet. What she saw was something much simpler. A man who had just been given something he didn't know how to hold yet, because no one had offered it to him before. She looked away first, not because she was uncomfortable, because she understood that some things needed room to settle before they could be looked at directly. I need to go home, she said. I need to check in on my brother. He's going to call tonight, and I have to sound like a person whose week was completely normal. Leo will take you, I know. She stood up and picked up her bag. Adrian.
Yes. When this is over, she stopped.
Considered her words with the same care she gave to everything. When Marcus is handled, and Eleanor is handled, and the person inside your organization is handled, I want one dinner. At a normal restaurant. Not one you own. Not one where anyone knows your name. Just a dinner like a regular person. He looked at her. Why? He asked. Because I want to see what you're like, she said, when you're not managing a crisis. The quiet that followed was long enough to have weight. "I'm not sure I know what that's like," he said honestly. "I know," she said. And this time she was the one using the phrase, and she said it with enough warmth that it meant something entirely different than it had every time he'd said it to her. "That's why I want to find out." She walked to the door. Leo was already in the hallway. She was almost through it when Adrian spoke again. "Lydia." She turned. He was still sitting in the chair, one hand resting on the armrest, looking at her with the expression she'd now seen enough times to know. It was the real one, the one that existed underneath all the others. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the fraud report, not for the documents, not for the Eleanor Marsh discovery, or the regulatory call, or the 11 minutes to spare." She understood that without him saying it. Just, thank you. For showing up. For staying. For choosing to believe him when she had every reason not to. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We're not done." But she said it with something in her voice that was close enough to warmth that it didn't land as a warning. And she walked out into the hallway and followed Leo to the car, and the door closed behind her, and she allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of sitting in the back seat with her eyes closed and her hands in her lap, feeling the specific weight of a day that had started at 7 in the morning with a phone call and ended with $7.5 million frozen and a man saying thank you in a voice she was almost certain he used with no one else. 30 seconds. Then she opened her eyes and looked out the window at the moving city and thought about what came next, because there was always a what comes next. And the part she could not yet see was the part she had learned in the past 2 weeks to be most careful about. The person inside Adrian's organization was still unidentified. They knew she existed. They knew she mattered. They knew that Adrian had let her see things he hadn't shown his own people. And that she understood with a clarity that settled cold and quiet in the center of her chest, made her not less of a target. It made her more of one. The call came at 2 in the morning. Not Adrian, not Leo, not Sasha with a legal update or Deb with a transfer trace. It was her brother. Marcus Carter was 22 years old, in his second year at Northeastern, studying electrical engineering with the specific intensity of someone who understood that the scholarship and his sister's financial support were not things to be wasted. He called every Sunday without fail, and occasionally on Wednesdays when something happened he needed to process out loud. He never called at 2 in the morning. "Mark," she said, already sitting up. "What's wrong?" "Lydia." His voice was careful in a way that immediately told her he was trying not to frighten her. Marcus only got careful when he was frightened himself. "There's a man outside my building." She was on her feet before he finished the sentence. "What man?" "He's been out there for an hour. He's not doing anything. He's just standing across the street looking at the entrance. I noticed him when I came back from the library, and then I looked again 40 minutes later, and he was still there, and I just, a breath. I'm probably being paranoid. You're not being paranoid. Go inside right now. Lock your door, don't open it for anyone, and stay on the phone with me." "Lydia, what is going on?" Now. She heard him move, heard the elevator, heard the door of his apartment. The lock. Then she hung up and called Adrian. He picked up on the second ring. "My brother," she said. "Someone's watching his building. Right now. No pause at all. Address," he said. She gave it. "Keep him inside. I'll call you back in 4 minutes." He called back in 3. "There are 2 men, not one," he said. "The second one is in a car on the side street. It's not surveillance. It's positioning." The word landed like a stone. Positioning meant they were not watching Marcus to gather information. They were watching him to use him. "They're going to take him," she said. "They're considering it," Adrian said. "They haven't moved yet. Which means they're waiting for something in order, a confirmation, a signal." His voice was level, but underneath it was a tightness she had learned to recognize as Adrian Castellano, actively managing the urge to act before he thought. "If I move on them now, they call it in, and whoever is directing this knows we're onto the positioning. But if you wait, they might move first," she said. Yes, she stood in her kitchen, in the dark, with her phone pressed so hard against her ear it hurt, and thought about Marcus, 22 years old, careful and brilliant and completely uninvolved in any of this. who had never done anything except be her brother and made the calculation in 2 seconds flat. "Move," she said. "Right now. Don't wait for the signal." "Lydia, he is 22 years old, and he has nothing to do with any of this, Adrian." "Move," a beat of silence. "All right," he said. "Then stay on the line." She heard very little over the next 11 minutes. Some movement. A door. Leo's voice saying something in a low tone she couldn't make out. Silence that had texture to it, the kind that meant things were happening that were not being narrated. Then Adrian's voice, closer than before. "It's done. The 2 men are gone. There's someone on your brother's building, until morning." "Gone how?" she said. "Gone as in they left," he said. Quickly, she understood what that meant well enough not to push further. "Is Marcus safe?" "Yes. There's one of my people in the lobby of his building right now who will stay until I say otherwise." She leaned against the kitchen counter and put her free hand over her eyes and breathed once. The way she breathed when she was preventing something from happening that she did not want to happen in front of anyone. "Lydia," Adrian said, "I'm fine. You don't have to be fine right now." "I know." A breath. "This is Marcus Vale's doing, or the person inside your organization?" "Both, I think," he said. "The internal person identified your brother. Marcus provided the positioning. They're working in coordination, which means whoever is inside my organization has been communicating with Marcus directly, not just feeding him information." "That's a tighter connection than you thought."
Yes.
"Who has access to your internal personnel files?" she asked. "Your employee information. Addresses of people connected to your associates." "A very short list," he said. "How short?" 6 people, he said, including Marcus. 5 then. "Yes. Who are they?" He named them slowly. She listened and filed each name with the same precise attention she gave to everything. When he finished, she said, "Read me the names again." He did. "Garrett," she said. "Your logistics person."
Yes, Sasha, yes.
"Dev, your technical analyst." "A man named Price who handles property management." "And a woman named Christine who manages internal communications." "Yes, Christine," she said. "What about her? How long has she been with you?" 8 years, he said. "She was hired by..." He stopped. The silence had a shape. "She was hired by Marcus," Adrian said very quietly. The kind of quiet that came after someone said the thing that changed the shape of everything they thought they knew. 8 years, Lydia said. "Yes. So she was placed by Marcus 8 years ago. She manages internal communications, meaning she sees personnel files, associate connections, family contacts. Everything," Adrian said. "She sees everything that moves internally." "She's the source," Lydia said. "Not a recent one. An original one. Marcus has had eyes inside your organization for 8 years, Adrian. This plan wasn't built in 18 months. The infrastructure for it was built 8 years ago. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was the silence of a man confronting the full scope of something he had trusted that had been hollow from nearly the beginning. "Christine," he said, not a question, not disbelief. Something past both of those, the flat, exhausted recognition of a man who had just understood how long he had been wrong. "I'm sorry," Lydia said, and meant it. "Don't be." His voice had gone very still. "I should have built better structures. You trusted people you'd known for years. I built an organization on the assumption that the people closest to me were loyal, because I'd given them no reason not to be," he said. "That's not trust. That's arrogance." She did not argue with him. Not because she agreed entirely, but because this was not the moment for that conversation, and he knew it too, and would not have heard it tonight if she tried. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Tonight," he said, "nothing. Christine doesn't know she's been identified. If I move on her now, Marcus knows immediately, and whatever remaining plays he has get deployed at once." Another pause. "I need one more day." "To do what?" "To close everything before I close her." She did not sleep after she hung up. She called Marcus back and told him that the Ansausat had been a misunderstanding, a security mix-up from a client situation at her firm. Resolved. Nothing to worry about. Someone would be in his building lobby overnight, just as a precaution. Marcus was too smart to fully believe her and too accustomed to his sister's careful management of difficult information to push. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine, Lydia. Are you actually fine, or are you fine the way you were fine when Dad left and you told me everything was great for 4 months while you were working double shifts?" She closed her eyes. "I'm handling something complicated," she said. "And I will tell you everything when it's done. I promise." "Is it dangerous?" A pause that was half a second too long. "Less than it was this morning," she said, which was technically true. Marcus was quiet. Then, "You don't have to do everything alone, you know." "I know, do you?" She almost said, "I know," again, and caught herself. "No," she said honestly. "I'm working on it." After she hung up, she sat at her kitchen table with the folder of documents from the State Street office and a legal pad, and spent 2 hours writing down everything she knew about the structure, not because she needed to. Her memory had it complete, but because writing it helped her think, helped her see the part she was still looking at from the wrong angle. At 4:30 in the morning, she found the wrong angle. It was not in the financial structure. The financial structure was what she'd been examining. The financial structure was Marcus's mechanism, the how of what he was doing. The wrong angle was the why. She went back to the first thing she had been told. The first night in the back room at Meridian, someone at a dinner party in Cambridge had mentioned her name as someone connected to Adrian. That dinner party was the trigger point. That conversation was what had started everything. But she had attended that dinner as a +1 to her employer, Griffin, who consulted for one of Adrian's subsidiaries. Griffin was not in Adrian's inner circle. Griffin was peripheral, which meant someone at that dinner party had known enough about both Griffin's consulting arrangement and Lydia's relationship with Griffin to construct the connection. That was not information available from inside Adrian's organization. That was information that required knowledge of Adrian's external business relationships and the people adjacent to them, which meant someone else had been in that room. At 5 in the morning, she called Adrian. He answered in one ring. She suspected he hadn't slept either. "The Cambridge dinner," she said. "Who else was there that night?" "Not just your people." "Everyone. The guest list." A pause. "I wasn't there myself." "I know, but someone told Marcus or Christine about that dinner. Someone made the connection between me and Griffin and your subsidiary. That information didn't come from inside your organization. It came from someone who was in that room and knew enough about your external operations to see the significance of that particular connection." She heard him thinking. She had learned what Adrian thinking sounded like over the phone, a specific, brief quality of silence, different from his other silences. "The dinner was hosted by a man named Arthur Finn," he said slowly. "He runs a consulting network that contracts with several of my legitimate subsidiaries. He invited Griffin. He would have known about the consulting arrangement." "And Finn, does he know Marcus Vale?" A pause. "They went to the same university," Adrian said. 20 years ago." Another pause. "I never connected that. There was no reason to connect that until now," she said. "Arthur Finn has been a business contact for 11 years, he said. He's not an insider. He's external, which is exactly why Marcus would use him," she said. "Finn gives Marcus information about your external relationships, people you interact with, through legitimate business channels. Christine gives Marcus information about your internal structure and personnel. Between them, Marcus has a complete picture, everything above ground and everything below." The silence that followed lasted longer than any other. "3 people," Adrian said finally. "For 8 years. At least 8 years," she said. "Finn's relationship with you goes back 11. Which means this started. Before you even think you remember it starting," she said quietly. She heard him breathe. The scope of it was enormous. Not just the financial fraud, not just the transfer structure and the shell corporations and the forged credential. 8 years of a man inside his closest circle feeding information to a network designed specifically to dismantle everything Adrian had built. 8 years of dinners and meetings and conversations and decisions made in the belief that the room was secure, and all of it compromised. "Adrian," she said. "Yes, you have to let me help you finish this. You've already, not what I've already done. What comes next?" She looked at the legal pad in front of her, the structure mapped clearly, the connections marked, the three-point network of Marcus and Christine and Finn, laid out with the clean logic of something she could see completely. I can build the evidentiary package, full documentation, financial trail, communication timestamps, the credential forgery, the test transfer, all of it. Something airtight enough that when it goes to the authorities, there is no defense, no ambiguity, no room to argue. That's not a small thing, he said. That's weeks of work. It's 4 days, she said. If you give me complete access to everything Dev has, every transfer record, every filing, every communication timestamp your system has logged. Lydia, 4 days, she said again. And at the end of 4 days, Marcus Vale, Eleanor Marsh, Christine, and Arthur Finn are handed to the relevant authorities with a case so complete that the prosecution doesn't have to do anything except file it. Another silence. Why? He asked. Because my name is still on that forged credential, she said. Because my brother had 2 men standing outside his building tonight. Because I have spent 3 weeks being a piece on someone else's board, and I am done being a piece. I want to be the one who finishes it. She heard him exhale slowly. 4 days, he said. 4 days. You'll have everything Dev has by 6 this morning. Good, she said. And Adrian, yes. Don't move on Christine yet. Not until the package is ready. The moment she knows she's been identified, she signals Marcus and everything accelerates. I know, he said. And this time the phrase was not deflection. It was complete agreement. She said goodbye and hung up and looked at the legal pad and the folder and the cold gray light beginning at the edge of the window and felt something she had not felt since the whole thing started. Not fear, not anger. Not the careful, controlled assessment of a woman managing a situation outside her experience. She felt ready. The 4 days were the most intense of her professional life, and she had once worked 36 consecutive hours to catch an embezzlement pattern that her firm's partners had missed for 2 years. Dev sent everything at 6:15 in the morning, complete transfer records going back 14 months, communication logs, filing timestamps, server access records that showed exactly when Christine had queried personnel files and what she had accessed. It was a mountain of raw data, and Lydia went through it the way she went through everything systematically, from the foundation, looking for the structure underneath the numbers. Adrian came in person on the second day. She had set up at her kitchen table because she worked better there than anywhere else, and when he arrived, Liko let him in downstairs, and he walked into her apartment and stopped just inside the door, looking at the table, 3 laptops, 2 legal pads, the entire document folder organized into 9 distinct sections by colored tabs, 3 separate timeline charts she'd constructed from the transfer records. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. You slept? He asked. Some, when I remembered. He set a bag on the counter without commenting further. She smelled coffee and something from a restaurant she didn't recognize and noted, without saying anything, that he had remembered she took her coffee with no sugar. Small detail, she filed it alongside all the others. He sat across from her and reviewed what she'd built so far, asking questions with the focused precision of someone who understood financial structures well enough to know which clarifications mattered. She answered each one directly and watched his face as the full picture assembled itself in his mind. Halfway through the second legal pad, he went still. This timestamp, he said, pointing to a line in the communication log. 3 years ago, Christine accessed the personnel file for my brother. Lydia looked up. You have a brother, she said. She had not known that. Younger. He's not involved in my operations. He has a completely separate life, completely separate career. He's never had any connection to anything I do, but Christine accessed his file. 3 years ago, Adrian said. And then
He scanned the record.
she accessed it twice more. 18 months ago, 4 months ago. The implication was cold and clear. She wasn't just building a file on people currently connected to you, Lydia said. She was mapping everyone who could be used as leverage. She's been building a complete threat library. My brother, he said. He's in that library, she said. She watched his face. Not the controlled face, the real one, the one she'd been learning. What moved across it in that moment was the thing she recognized from the night he'd first understood the scope of Marcus's betrayal, but sharper, more personal. "He doesn't know any of this exists," Adrian said. "No," she said. "But Christine does. I have to warn him." "Not yet," she said carefully. "If you contact him now, outside your normal patterns, Christine monitors your communications. She'll see it. She'll know something changed." He looked at her. "2 more days," she said. "The package will be ready in 2 more days. Then you warn him. Then you move on, Christine. Then it's done." 2 days, he said. "Yes." He looked at the table. At the organized papers, at the timelines she'd built out of his organization's most protected internal data. "You know things about my operation now," he said, "that my own people don't know." "Yes," she said. "And when this is done, I will know how to be appropriately discreet about it." "That's not in question." "I wasn't questioning it," he said. "I was observing it." She looked up at him. "You trust me," she said. "Yes," he said simply. "Not calculated, not strategic. Just the fact of it, stated plainly, the way he stated things when he had stopped managing how they sounded." She held that word, and everything it cost a man like him to say it without conditions. "I know," she said. "And then, because it needed to be said plainly too, I trust you too." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the city continued at its ordinary pace, completely indifferent to the fact that 2 people were sitting at a table, covered in documents, having the most honest conversation either of them had attempted in longer than they could clearly name. Adrian reached out and straightened one of the papers on the table, a small unconscious gesture, something to do with his hands. "Dinner," he said. "When this is done, you said a regular restaurant." "I said a restaurant you don't own. I know several I don't own." "Surprising. I don't own everything," he said. "Just most of the things that matter to me." She held his gaze for a moment. "I'll add that to the list of things I'm still figuring out about you," she said. He almost smiled. She was beginning to learn what Adrian Castellano, almost smiling, looked like: a slight ease at the corner of his mouth, a particular quality of attention that softened at the edges. It was better than a full smile from most people she knew. "2 more days," he said, standing. "2 more days," she confirmed. He went to the door. "Adrian," she said. He turned. "The restaurant in Cambridge. The dinner party." She looked at him. "The person who introduced me to Griffin, who brought me as a +1, she didn't know what she was doing. She was just being kind." "I know," he said. "Dana," she said. "Her name is Dana. She's my best friend." And none of this, she paused. "She's completely clear of all of it. She was never in question," he said. "I just needed to say it." He nodded. And then he left, and Leo's footsteps followed him down the stairs, and the apartment was quiet again. Just Lydia and the documents and the legal pads and the cold coffee and the work that needed finishing. She picked up the pen. She finished it. The package was delivered to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI's Boston field office on a Thursday morning, through Sasha's legal contacts, with full documentation and a clean chain of evidence that Lydia had spent 47 hours assembling from raw data into the most airtight financial fraud case she had ever constructed. Marcus Vale was arrested the same afternoon. Eleanor Marsh was arrested the following morning in Providence, where she had apparently been waiting for the transfers to clear. Christine was placed on administrative suspension. By mid-afternoon, the administrative language was Sasha's careful work, and by evening was in a federal interview room being asked questions she had no good answers for. Arthur Finn, who had apparently realized something had gone wrong approximately 6 hours before the package hit the FBI's desk, had attempted to fly to London and gotten as far as Logan Airport before discovering that his passport had been flagged by a customs hold that Dev had arranged through channels Lydia decided not to examine too carefully. She heard about each development from Sasha, who called with brief, precise updates in the tone of someone delivering a weather forecast. Adrian called last. It was evening. She was on her couch, which she had not sat on comfortably in 2 weeks, with a cup of tea that was the right temperature for the first time in memory. "It's done," he said. "I know." Sasha called. "All 4, he said. "Yes." A pause, not uncomfortable. The kind of pause that meant something was trying to be said, and needed a moment to find its shape. Your name is clean, he said. The fraud report is documented as identity theft. The FBI will confirm that within 48 hours. Halcott and Green have been notified through proper channels that a former business associate attempted to misuse employee credentials. Your employer knows nothing except that you were the victim of an attempted fraud and cooperated fully with authorities. That's good, she said. Your brother is safe, he said. I've spoken to the people watching his building. They'll stand down tonight. Thank you, she said. Another pause. I owe you more than I can calculate, he said. Don't calculate it, she said. That's not what this was. What was it? She looked at the wall above the television and thought about the past 3 weeks, the worst blind date of her life, the back room of an expensive restaurant, a folder of documents she'd carried home in her bag, 47 hours of work at a kitchen table, 2 in the morning phone calls, the look on a man's face when he realized he had been trusted by someone who had every reason not to. It was 2 people, she said, figuring out that the other one wasn't what they expected. The quiet that followed was the warmest silence she had experienced in recent memory. The restaurant, he said. Yes, she said. Saturday. Okay, I'll find somewhere I don't own. That would be a good start, she said. She heard something in his voice that might, if she was interpreting it correctly, have been the sound of a man who was as close to completely at ease as he had been in a very long time. Lydia, he said. Yes, thank you, he said, for not deciding I wasn't worth the trouble. She thought about the first night, the restaurant, the moment she had nearly walked all the way to the exit. I almost did, she said honestly, several times. I know, but you made it difficult to write you off entirely. How? Because, she said, every time I thought I had you categorized, you did something I didn't expect. People who surprise me are hard to walk away from. The silence that followed was long and full and entirely comfortable. She finished her tea. Outside, the city moved through its evening the way it always did, indifferent, enormous, full of ordinary people living ordinary lives that had no idea how close they ran, sometimes, to something extraordinary. Saturday felt very close, and not close enough. Saturday arrived the way important things often did, quietly, without announcement, as though it had not been the thing she had been thinking about every day since Thursday evening. Lydia changed clothes 3 times. She was not a woman who changed clothes 3 times. She was a woman who decided what she was wearing, put it on, and moved forward without reconsidering. She had operated this way her entire adult life, and it had served her efficiently. But the first outfit felt too formal. The second felt like she was trying to appear casual, which was worse than being formal. The third was what she had originally put on before she started second-guessing herself, and she looked at herself in the mirror and said, out loud, to no one, "This is a dinner." You have been to dinners before. She had, just not with this particular person. And not with the specific accumulated weight of 3 weeks that had included fraud prevention, federal investigations, 2 in the morning phone calls, 47 hours of evidentiary work, and the kind of honesty that most people spent entire relationships avoiding. Dana called at 5:45. Tell me everything, Dana said immediately. About what? About whatever has been happening to you for the past 3 weeks that you have communicated to me exclusively, in the form of, I'm fine, it's complicated, I'll explain later. Lydia. It has been 3 weeks, I know. Are you safe? Yes, completely. Is this connected to that terrible blind date I sent you on? A pause. Dana, oh my God, it's not. I sent you on a date with a man connected to the Boston Mafia and something happened, and you handled it yourself and didn't tell me for 3 weeks. That is a significant oversimplification. But is it wrong? Lydia sat on the edge of her bed. No, she said. It's not entirely wrong. Dana made a sound that communicated approximately 47 different emotions simultaneously. Are you in danger? Not anymore. It's resolved. And the man. Which man? Lydia. A pause. I'm having dinner with him tonight, she said. The sound Dana made this time was different from the previous one. I need details. I don't have time for details. Then give me one word. Lydia thought about it. Surprising, she said. That's terrifying and wonderful, Dana said. Call me tomorrow. I will, Lydia. Yes. You deserve something that surprises you, Dana said with the particular conviction of a best friend delivering a truth they had been holding for a long time. You have spent 10 years managing everything and surprising no one, and I have watched you be the most capable person in every room, and I want you to be happy. Whatever this is, whatever he is, I want you to be happy. Lydia held the phone against her ear and felt the words settle in a way she hadn't expected them to. I know, she said. She meant it completely. The restaurant was on a side street in the South End, the kind of place with 12 tables and a handwritten menu and no dress code and no visible security and no host who knew anyone's name before they gave it. She confirmed this the moment she walked in, and the woman at the door looked at her with the genuine blankness of someone who had no idea who she was. It felt extraordinary. Adrian was already there. He stood when she came in, not a performance, just reflex, the kind of thing that had been built into him early enough that it happened without thought. He was wearing a jacket with no tie, and he looked like a man who had made a specific decision to appear less like what he was, and had not entirely succeeded, but had made a genuine effort. She noted the effort. You found it, she said. I did research, he said. You researched a restaurant to make sure you didn't own it. I researched several. This one had the best reviews and no connection to any of my holdings going back 12 years. She sat down across from him. The table was small, normal-sized for a normal restaurant, not the deliberately distanced tables of Meridian or the anonymous office furniture of State Street. Just a table. How does it feel? She asked. What? Being in a room where nobody knows who you are. He looked around briefly. Strange, he said, but not bad. A waiter came young, genuinely unhurried, no performance of deference, and took their drink order with the cheerful efficiency of someone who had not heard of Adrian Castellano and could not have cared less about his real estate portfolio. When he left, Adrian looked at her directly. How are you? He asked. Not how is the case proceeding. Not has there been any regulatory follow-up. Not a transition into information exchange or situation management. Just the question plainly. I'm good, she said. And then, because she had spent 3 weeks being honest with this man and saw no reason to stop, I'm better than I expected to be. I thought when it was done I'd feel mostly relieved. Mostly I feel settled, like something that was off balance corrected itself. Because of the case? Partly, she said. Partly because of this. He understood what this meant. She could see it. I owe you a real explanation, he said. Of everything. From the beginning. You don't owe me. I want to give you one, he said. Not because I owe it. Because I want you to understand. He set his hands flat on the table, the gesture she'd learned to recognize as Adrian being deliberate rather than careful. The dinner party in Cambridge. When Marcus's network identified you as a potential credential vehicle, I didn't know your name at that point. I only knew someone clean had been flagged by people who were looking at my organization from outside. When did you find out my name? 2 weeks before I sent Carter Vale to meet you, he said. I had someone trace the connection from the dinner party through Griffin back to Halcott and Green. Your file came across my desk on a Tuesday morning. Financial analyst, 31, clean record, no existing connection to my operations. A brother in college. She held very still. You knew about Marcus before the date, she said. Yes and no, he said. I knew someone at Halcott and Green was a possible target for a credential scheme. I didn't know the shape of it yet. I didn't know your name had been circulated specifically. He met her eyes. I want to be honest about this part, even though it doesn't make me look particularly good. Go ahead. I had Carter Vale meet you, because I wanted to assess you before I decided whether to warn you, he said. Not to protect you, to determine whether warning you was necessary, and whether you would be a complication or a resource. He paused. That was the calculation I was making before the date. You were a factor in a situation, not a person I was concerned about. The honesty of it landed without softening. I know, she said. Does it bother you? It would have, she said. 3 weeks ago. Before I understood how you think. She looked at him steadily. You were doing what you always do, managing variables before they become problems. The fact that the variable turned out to be a person who sat down across from your proxy and told him he looked like someone who'd never heard the word no that wasn't part of your calculation. Something moved in his expression. No, he said. It wasn't. When did it change? She asked. The calculation. He was quiet for a moment. When you walked away, he said, I was watching from across the restaurant. I watched the entire dinner. Cartervale had a specific script designed to provoke enough mild discomfort to measure your tolerance for dismissive behavior. Most people tolerate it longer than you did. Most people need the other person to escalate significantly before they disengage. I don't tolerate it at any level, she said. I know that now, he said. But watching you stand up and leave calmly, without drama, without giving him the satisfaction of an argument, I understood in that moment that you were not the kind of person who could be used as a credential vehicle without eventually understanding exactly what had happened to her. He paused. Which meant warning you wasn't optional, and the moment I decided warning you wasn't optional, you stopped being a variable. And became what? He looked at her. Someone I was responsible for having put in danger, he said. And someone I wanted to know. The waiter returned with their drinks. Neither of them spoke while he was at the table. When he left, the conversation resumed without the break having broken anything. You could have warned me by phone, she said, or through a lawyer, or through any number of indirect channels that didn't require you to personally block my exit and tell me my date was a paid actor. Yes, he said. So why did you do it yourself? The question sat on the table between them. Adrian picked up his glass and set it down without drinking. Because I had been making decisions about your life without your knowledge for 2 weeks, he said. And that felt wrong in a way I couldn't manage through a legal proxy. He looked at her directly. I needed to look at you when I told you. I needed to see your face when you understood. Because if your response had been fear or compliance or the particular kind of quiet that people have when they're going to accept something they shouldn't accept, I would have handled it completely differently. And my actual response, your actual response, he said, was to look at me like I was a problem you were going to solve. She almost laughed. That's a fair characterization. It was the first time in a very long time, he said, that someone looked at me like I was a problem rather than a solution. It was unexpectedly significant. She held that. Because everyone else needs something from you, she said.
Yes.
And I needed you to explain yourself.
Yes.
That's not the same as not needing anything, she said. I needed honesty. I needed to be treated like someone with the right to information that directly affected her. I know, he said, but the difference between what you needed and what everyone else needs. He paused. What everyone else needs from me makes them smaller. What you needed from me made me. Another pause, a longer one. It made me want to be better at being honest, which is not a thing I have historically valued in relation to other people. The restaurant continued around them, soft noise, other conversations, the specific warm ambient sound of a room full of people having ordinary evenings. Lydia sat inside that ordinary evening and looked at the man across from her and thought about everything she had seen in 3 weeks that she was almost certain no one else in his world had been allowed to see. Tell me something, she said. Something true. About yourself. Not about the situation. Not about Marcus or Christine or any of it. About you. He looked at her. What do you want to know? Anything you'd tell me, she said. And nothing you wouldn't. He thought about that. She watched him think, not the thinking he did during crisis management, fast and structural, but slower thinking, the kind that reached somewhere more interior. I grew up believing that the way you held power was by never letting anyone see that you had something to lose, he said. My father built the business on that principle. He was not a cruel man, but a sealed one. He loved us, I think. He just couldn't afford to show it in ways that could be used against him. So you learned to be sealed, too. I learned to perform being sealed, he said. For a long time, I thought those were the same thing. When did you find out they weren't? He was quiet. About 3 weeks ago, he said, when a woman I'd put in an impossible situation looked at me across a table and said that I looked like someone who'd never heard the word no, and then walked away. And I found myself doing something I had not done in 15 years of running this organization. What? Following her, he said simply, "Not to manage the situation. Not to contain a complication. I followed her because I didn't want her to leave." The mini-climax of that admission was quiet but complete. Lydia held it carefully. "That scared you," she said. "Considerably," he said. "It still does." "Why?" "Because the things I can't afford to lose are the things that can be used against me," he said. "That's not a lesson. It's a fact about my world that doesn't change because I want it to." "Marcus tried to use me against you," she said. "Yes." "And it didn't work." "No, because I wasn't just a person you were protecting," she said. "I was a person who could protect herself, who could do something useful, who made the situation harder for the people trying to exploit it, not easier." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "So the thing you were afraid of, that having something to lose makes you vulnerable, that's only entirely true if what you have to lose is passive," she said. "If what you have is someone who can stand next to you rather than behind you, the calculation is different." He was very still. "You're arguing," he said slowly, "that I should stop thinking of you as a liability and start thinking of you as a partner." "I'm observing," she said, "that the last 3 weeks went significantly better because there were 2 of us than they would have with 1. And I'm letting you draw your own conclusions." A pause. "Those are the same thing," he said. "Sometimes," she said. He almost smiled. The corner of the mouth ease she had learned to recognize as his real version of happiness. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it with the automatic reflex of a man whose phone buzzing had always meant something required his immediate attention. Then he turned it face down without looking at the message. She noticed. "You can check it," she said. "No," he said. "I can't. Something could be. Sasha handles it if it's operational," he said. "Leo handles it if it's security. Dev handles it if it's technical. If all 3 of them can't handle it, it waits 20 minutes. He looked at her. "I am having dinner. With a person I want to have dinner with. In a restaurant I don't own. It waits." She looked at him for a long moment. "You practice that," she said. "Garrett told me I should have a plan for managing my phone," he said. "I've been working on it." "How long have you been working on it?" "Since Tuesday." "Tuesday," she said. "You started preparing for this dinner on Tuesday." "I started preparing for this dinner," he said, with remarkable composure, "approximately 40 minutes after I told you Saturday on the phone." Something opened in her chest, warm, specific, impossible to categorize as anything other than what it was. "Adrian," she said. "Yes, you're going to have to get better at this," she said. "At being a person who has dinner and turns his phone over and takes 20 minutes to exist outside his own organization." "I know," he said. "I'm going to help with that." "I was hoping you would say that," he said. She picked up her glass. "But I want something in return," she said. "Name it. The next time something involves my life, my name, my brother, or anything in my proximity, you tell me first. Not after you've assessed it. Not after you've decided how much I need to know. First, before you make any decision." He held her gaze. "That's not how I've operated," he said. "I know. That's why I'm specifying it as a condition." "A condition," he said. "Yes. Of what?" The question was direct enough that the honest answer was required. "Of whatever this is," she said. "Whatever it's becoming. Which I think we both understand is something we don't have a good word for yet, and probably won't for a while, and I'm comfortable with that. But the baseline condition is that you treat me like someone who has the right to information that concerns her." He held her gaze for a long time. "All right," he said. Just that. "All right." The same 2 words he had said in the voice she'd heard through the closing door on State Street. Tired and human and honest. But this time they were set across a small table in a restaurant with 12 tables and a handwritten menu, face to face, without a door between them. "All right," she repeated. They ate dinner. It was the most ordinary thing that had happened to either of them in longer than they could accurately measure. They walked afterward. The evening was cool, the streets of the South End settling into their late quiet, and neither of them had suggested walking. They had simply both moved in the same direction when they left the restaurant, which said something without requiring words. He told her about his brother. His name was Daniel, real name. not a cover, and he was a structural engineer in Chicago who had built a family and a practice and a completely separate life with the specific deliberateness of someone who had grown up understanding that distance from his family's business was protective. Adrian had not seen him in 14 months. You should call him, Lydia said. I know. Not about Christine or the personnel file. Just call him. You have a brother. Adrian was quiet for a moment. He doesn't approve of what I do, he said. Does he need to approve of it to be your brother? Another pause, longer. No, he said. I suppose not. My mother left when Marcus was 4, she said. My father lasted until I was 19, then decided he had other things to do with his life. By the time Marcus started middle school, it was just the two of us. I worked 2 jobs and he studied hard, and we made it work by being completely honest with each other about what we needed and what we couldn't do. She looked at the street ahead. The thing that kept us together was never pretending things were fine when they weren't. It was exhausting, and sometimes it was brutal, but it was real. And real held, he said quietly. It always does, she said. Long after the performed version falls apart, he walked beside her without speaking for half a block. Then the dinner party in Cambridge, where your name first surfaced. Griffin was your employer's contact. Yes, but you told me you left early. I did. It wasn't my kind of evening. What is your kind of evening? He asked, and the question was so genuinely curious, so free of any strategic framing, that it stopped her slightly. This, she said, without thinking about it. And then, because it was honest and she was committed to honest, exactly this. A good meal, a real conversation, walking somewhere without a destination. He turned his head and looked at her. Good, he said. Good? That's good information to have, he said. For future reference, she shook her head slightly. You cannot help yourself. What do you mean? You categorize everything, she said. Good information to have for future reference. You just turned my answer into a data point. It is a data point, he said. It was also just a moment, she said. You're allowed to just let it be a moment. He thought about that with visible effort. I'm working on that too, he said. Add it to the list, she said. With the phone. The list is getting long. You have good staff, she said. They'll manage while you're busy becoming a person. He made a sound that was, she was almost entirely certain, a laugh. Brief and quiet and real. She had not heard him laugh before. It sounded like something that had not been used often enough and was slightly surprised to find itself happening. She filed it alongside everything else she was learning to read in him. They stopped at the corner where the street divided one direction toward her building, the other toward wherever Adrian's evening ended. It was the natural geography of a pause. He turned toward her. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. The case, he said. The federal investigation. The documentation you built. Sasha called this afternoon. The prosecutor's office reviewed the evidentiary package. She went very still. And they said it was the cleanest financial fraud case they had received in 11 years of practice. He looked at her steadily. They asked Sasha who built the package. Sasha said a financial analyst who was the victim of the credential theft. They asked if that analyst would be willing to consult on the prosecution's financial presentation. The words landed in layers. They want to hire me, she said. As a consultant. For the prosecution, your firm would be notified as a professional courtesy. Your credentials would be on record with the federal prosecutor's office. He paused. It would change your professional profile significantly. It would also mean your name is permanently associated with the exposure of this particular scheme, which provides a level of documented credibility that makes it very difficult for anyone to construct a false narrative around you in the future. She understood all of that immediately and completely. You arranged this, she said. Sasha arranged the introduction, he said carefully. The prosecutor's response was entirely their own. Adrian. The package was genuinely exceptional, he said. I didn't have to manufacture anything. I just made sure it reached the right desk. She looked at him. You protected my professional future, she said. You protected mine, he said, in ways that went considerably beyond what the situation required of you. Consulting on a prosecution is a direct professional benefit. It seemed he paused, searching for the word. Proportionate. That's a very calculated way to describe something generous, she said. I'm working on that too, he said. She looked at him in the evening light and thought about 3 weeks ago, the expensive restaurant, the terrible date, the practiced smile of a man performing familiarity with a room he didn't know, and the figure in her path who had said, "Don't walk away," in a voice that stopped her, not because it was a command, but because something in it sounded like it was asking. She had not understood that at the time. She understood it now. "I'll consult on the prosecution," she said. "Good." And Adrian, "Yes, call your brother," she said. "This week. Not about the case. Not about Christine. Just call him." He looked at her with the expression she had learned to read, as Adrian being moved by something he hadn't prepared for. "You keep asking me to do things that have nothing to do with protecting you or advancing the situation," he said. "Yes," she said. "Why? Because," she said, "protecting you and advancing the situation was never why I stayed. And I want you to know the difference." He held that. The street was quiet around them. Somewhere down the block, a door opened and closed, and a burst of warm restaurant noise came and went. The city breathed its ordinary breath. "The next time I need a second opinion on something that matters," he said slowly, "I'm calling you first." "That's the deal," she said. "Before Sasha." "I would hope so." "Before Garrett." "Absolute dev." "Adrian," she said. "I think you're stalling." He stopped. "Yes," he said. "I am." "Why?" "Because," he said, and his voice had the texture of a man saying something he had not said out loud before, possibly had not said at all, in any form, to any person. "Because this is the best evening I have had in a very long time, and I am finding it." He paused. Difficult to end. Lydia looked at him, and in that moment, the specific, irreducible, human moment of a man standing on a street corner, admitting that he didn't want to leave, she saw everything she needed to see. Not the feared businessman, not the careful operator, not the man whose name made journalists cautious and rivals nervous and rooms rearrange themselves. Just man, tired and honest and learning one evening at a time what it meant to let something matter. "Saturday in 2 weeks," she said. "Same arrangement. A restaurant you don't own. Your phone face down. A walk afterward." Something in him settled. She saw it happen. "Yes," he said. "And call your brother before then." "Yes. Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Lydia." She walked toward her building. She did not look back, not because she wasn't thinking about him, but because she understood that some moments were better held forward than turned around. She heard his footsteps move in the opposite direction. Steady, unhurried, different from the footsteps of a man who was managing something. These were the footsteps of a man who was, possibly for the first time in a long time, simply going home. The federal prosecution of Marcus Vale, Eleanor Marsh, Christine Harlow, and Arthur Finn opened 6 weeks later. The evidentiary package held. The financial trail was unambiguous. The credential forgery documentation was, as the prosecutor had told Sasha, the cleanest work they had seen in over a decade. Lydia testified as a consulting expert on the financial structure. She was composed, precise, and entirely devastating to the defense's argument that the scheme lacked evidence of intent. She had 47 hours of documented work, demonstrating intent so clearly that the defense counsel asked for a recess after her second hour of testimony. Marcus Vale's attorney attempted, during cross-examination, to suggest that her involvement in the documentation process indicated personal bias stemming from a personal relationship with the victim. She looked at the attorney calmly. "The victim of the credential theft," she said, "was me. My bias, if I have one, is toward accuracy. The math doesn't change based on who I know." The jury was out for 6 hours. All 4 defendants were convicted. Marcus Carter, her brother, not the defendant with the same first name, a coincidence she had found grimly amusing from the beginning, met Adrian for the first time on a Sunday afternoon 3 months after the trial. He arrived with the specific evaluative energy of a younger sibling who had been patient for a very long time and was done being patient. He shook Adrian's hand. He looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at his sister. He seems like a lot, Marcus said, in the tone of someone delivering an honest observation. He is, Lydia said. He's working on it. She means that specifically, Adrian said. There is an actual list. Marcus looked between them. Okay, he said finally. I can work with that. He meant it. Lydia could hear it. Adrian, she noted, looked like a man who had passed an evaluation he had not known he was being given, and was quietly, significantly relieved. She did not point this out. Some moments were better left to settle on their own. Adrian called his brother on a Thursday evening, 8 days after the South End dinner. He told her about it the following Saturday, in the same restaurant with 12 tables, his phone face down on the table, a walk planned for afterward. How did it go, she asked. He was surprised, Adrian said. We talked for an hour. He asked about the case. He'd read about it, it was covered in the business press. A pause. He said he was glad I was all right. Were you? What? All right, she said, before all this. Were you all right? He thought about it with the specific honesty she had come to expect from him in the months since a terrible blind date had become the best accident of both their lives. No, he said. I was operational, I was effective. I was not all right, and now? He looked at her across the small table. 12 tables, a handwritten menu, no one who knew his name, a phone face down, a list on his desk at home that had grown to 11 items, and was, she thought, the most honest document in any building he occupied. Now, he said, I am learning what that feels like. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Not a dramatic gesture, not a performance of anything. Just her hand on his, warm and deliberate, the way real things were simple and specific and present. He turned his hand over and held hers. Outside, Boston moved through an ordinary Saturday the way it always did, indifferent to the small, specific, important fact that in a restaurant on a side street, a woman who almost walked away and a man who almost let her had chosen, every single day since the night they met, to stay. Some people came into your life as complications and became the answer to a question you hadn't known you were asking. Some things that began as the worst evening of your life became the beginning of the only one that mattered. And the woman who had walked away from an impossible situation, who had followed the evidence, held the line, told the truth, and refused at every turn to be less than exactly what she was, did not become someone new. She simply became at last fully seen. That was enough. That was everything. That was the only ending worth having.